record. Okay. So again, thanks for coming here, homies, to learn about neuroscience and manifestation. So what essentially drew me to this type of work was not affiliated. I kind of know actually both Eric and Kieran, you guys them, but Bam talks about this like Abraham Hicks rhetoric, and yeah, I don't know. Kieran knows as well. We're both interested in Lacey Phillips' work, and she brought this idea to my attention about the idea that if you are trying to project positive thoughts, but your blocks are down here, you have this like discord of energy, and you're just not able to manifest. So I studied psychology and neuroscience, and it was interesting because I was starting to become really intrigued by the idea of hypnosis and neuroplasticity and how to use this to my advantage and like biohacking. And Lacey kind of came into my life and totally merges the two of manifestation. So her rhetoric essentially says that, yeah, if you have these subconscious limiting beliefs, you're not going to be able to manifest. So today I'm going to go into those overt positive vibes, and then I'm going to go into what is manifestation from like a metaphysical standpoint, but then also from a little bit more of like an empirically based logical standpoint, talking about your imprintation of magical ways. So again, resistance to positive thoughts. Your subconscious does not believe those really highly positive thoughts, those ideas about winning the lottery or making $10,000 this month. You can't manifest it. It's just not going to happen because you're almost creating more resistance by trying to put yourself on this plane. You're trying to go from 0 to 100, and by like forcing everything, you're just creating more and more resistance. And so from a quantum physics standpoint, manifestation has to do with the idea that the world is made up of wave and particle energy. So waves come from your mind, your thoughts. So those frequencies emit into the metaphysical space, and you can, start to maybe plant ideas into the quantum reality. But your particle body also has a wavelength. So again, this is the idea that if you have these overt positive thoughts, but maybe you have some stagnant energy in your body from subconscious beliefs, from your neurological structuring, your energy, like the Hertz frequency, isn't aligning. So this co-creation is contingent on your subconscious neurological pathways aligning with whatever you're trying to call in. And this is the idea of being like a low vibe or high vibe energy. But there is the neurological standpoint as well. So our brain is influenced by genetic influences. So epigenetics, we can change them, but we've received all of this imprintation from our ancestors and our parents. And then we also have neurological pathways that were forged at a young age. So there are these things called hypnotic blueprints that I'll get into more, but it's essentially the accumulation of different subconscious beliefs that manifest basically at a time of fear, of fight or flight. And this could be in, infancy or, at a very young age, or this could be from a traumatic event. Say you were in an abusive relationship, or, you made a poor financial decision and lost a bunch of money, or, something that was really traumatic that made you like seriously fear for your survival. Those will basically build neurological pathways, and they'll be triggered every time that something comes up that's similar. And it doesn't have to exactly resemble it, but those neurological pathways will be activated again. And this is because essentially our brains evolve to hold on to things that we had to survive. So evolutionary, we were animals. We were running around in the woods and, running around trying to survive tigers and bears and trying to find food. So our brains are neurologically structured to hold on to some of those negative experiences more than some of the positive experiences because it means survival. So essentially, if you have gone through a traumatic experience, you build a really strong neurological pathway for that experience, and then you keep playing it out because you have survived it before. You have the means to face that traumatic event head on and come out the other side. So you almost start to seek out these negative experiences because you know what they're about. You have neurological pathways to support you on that journey. So although it sounds counterproductive, you might subconsciously seek them out. And then that's also with epigenetics. So I'll get into that more on another slide. Yeah, here, epigenetics. So not all of our genes are expressed in our phenotype. So what that means is that you are, inheriting a bunch of genes from your parents and your ancestors, but they aren't all expressed, and that's due to a lot of environmental influences. So this is like the nature v nurture type of debate. And yes, we do inherit a lot of things, but some of those genes can be activated. So for instance, if like babies. Okay, so babies are really, really good at picking up languages. You can teach a baby like, anything. There are children that know like 8 languages within like, the first 3 years of their life or something. And that's because we've activated these neurological pathways and we have started to strengthen their cognitive and their language processing structures in their brains. And we are like activating some of those general cognitive abilities that they already had innately genetically, but we're just essentially like feeding them more. So this goes 2 ways too. You can have the restriction of some of those genes as well, and that is shown in like malnutrition, or they have like identical twins and one will be a smoker, one's not a smoker, and then you see how it affects, one's shorter than the other because he was a smoker and things like that. But then we also have genetic predispositions. So that has to do with past experiences and ancestral trauma. So essentially, ancestral trauma is the idea that stressful events are being passed on to your offspring. And especially for women, this goes down 2 generations. If a pregnant woman experiences a traumatic event, she'll pass that on to the fetus, but then it'll also be passed on to the female's eggs as well. So that's going on for generations and generations to come. And these past experiences as well, this has to do with, this nurture triggering of certain genes and expressions of those genes. And the way that this plays into manifestation is that, again, it has to do with this kind of like fight or flight, imprinting these certain neurological structures that kind of have us seek out certain experiences over and over again. Or it has to do with those people that seem like super gifted, those people that like things that just come like easily to them. And it's because of these subconscious and these genetic influences that have quite literally altered the structures of our brains to seek out certain experiences that are either serving us or not serving us. And this is all because it's like we're in a modern world now. If we were still, just those Neanderthals roaming around, like our brains would be super, super useful for that type of survival. But because we have moved away from that and there's so many other influences now, our structuring of our brain can be a bit limiting if we don't know how to work with it. So the idea of neuroplasticity is that your neurological structuring is actually really malleable. So in order for a neurological structure to be implemented and to grow in your brain, there's actually like a full-on structural change in your brain. So you can think of this as like a memory or something. So if you are trying to remember something like a phone number or whatever, it normally stores in your working memory and you don't actually download it fully. But at some point with reinforcement, you come to this thing called LTP, long-term potentiation. And at this moment, there are like neurotransmitters that are triggered and growth of new dendrites and neurons will begin, and you'll actually form a new neurological pathway and change the structure of your brain. So we're always altering our neurological connectivity, which is incredible. And this is great in some respects, but if we have this subconscious limiting belief that we're constantly reinforcing in different situations, then we're tying it to other sensory modalities and we're increasing its connectivity. So if you keep playing something out, it's going to be connected to like the smell of the event. It's going to be connected to maybe like a physical feeling. And this is why maybe if you've experienced like anxiety or PTSD or something along those lines, that you'll have like a lot of the same feelings that you had in that moment of the traumatic event arise again, because you're triggering that neurological pathway and it's connected to all these other things. So you'll start to sweat and your heart rate will go up, and you'll feel like you're in that moment again. But this can happen with really small things as well. I mean, something again like my wet hair when I came out here today, like I just had this like nagging feeling of my mother being like, you can't have wet hair, like they're not going to take you seriously. And I could feel my shoulders get tense. I felt small, like just that old subconscious limiting belief bubbling back up to make my worth essentially be decreased. So just starting to like recognize how maybe you might be playing those out and maybe some of those physiological triggers. And like examples of this and that I really enjoy is like the idea of cortical blindness. So this is somebody who was born that was blind. Neuroplasticity will start to take over that visual processing in your occipital lobe. And blind people can actually use this thing called echolocation, kind of similar to dolphins. And so their auditory processing systems will start to override the visual processing, and then they'll also have this increase in their spatial awareness in their I believe it's the temporal lobe, but don't quote me on that one. But they'll essentially walk around and make these like clicking noises, like they'll just be like, and they can hear based on echoes what the space looks like. So they'll tell you like, oh yeah, there's a 5-foot hedge here. There's a car parked to my left-hand side. The sidewalk ends in 5 feet. And like they'll give you a perfect visual representation of the external world without being able to see. So just understanding like how powerful our brains are and how they are malleable, and we can start to recognize these limiting subconscious beliefs and start to rework the neurological pathways. And then for experience as well, what do we have neurological structures for, and what have we learned? So just going back in your experience, and maybe it's not jumping out to you that it was traumatic to begin with, but just seeing how it could be limiting. Like the wet hair thing again, I know I keep using that example, but it's so true. Like, okay, maybe that wasn't traumatic, but it's definitely limiting me. I'm just gonna stop to see if you guys have any questions so far. Is everyone good?
Yep, everything good so far.
Sweet.
I love this so much. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like
Same.
hearing Lucy's work, it's just so cool to really, because she doesn't go super deep into it, so
Yeah.
it's really cool to see like, oh wow, this is what's happening when I'm in hypnosis.
Yeah.
I love it.
Loves too. I'm such a fangirl. So reconstructing our neurological pathways, as I said, once they're built, they're in there. So we keep kind of triggering them over time. Every time that a situation that kind of resembles something that we've gone through, we're just reinforcing that neurological pathway. So it's not as easy to delete because we're constantly reactivating it. But I mean, you can do this like use it or lose it type of thing. And this is like the idea of like those blind people that didn't use their visual processing systems. So eventually like it was thrown to the wayside and taken over. But it takes a lot of time. The process can be really slow to prune some of those structures and those limiting beliefs. So as Karen just mentioned, doing hypnosis. So we are both in Lacey Phillips' pathway, and she essentially has these recordings of hypnotic sessions that you can go through, and it'll just kind of like bring up your subconscious beliefs and show you what's going on, and then you start to like reprogram them. So you essentially envision a more serving experience that you can then reactivate next time you're in a similar situation. So as opposed to having that previous imprintation of something that wasn't really serving you, you have built this new pathway that will actually help you propel yourself into, you know, whatever you're trying to call in. So it's rewriting that connectivity, which is amazing. And again, this goes back to the hypnotic blueprint. So it's triggered and it begins to operate at a subconscious level, and this like can attract circumstances and people into your life without even you really noticing it. You know, there's this theory that states that we actually have a lot of our experiences predetermined, and it's because you seek them out genetically and neurologically. It's like you can almost predict what someone's going to do before they do it if you are aware of the type of, you know, behaviors and subconscious beliefs that they're holding on to. It starts to become really obvious in yourself once you recognize them. And yeah, so hypnotherapy, and I'm going to go into like how you can maybe implement hypnotherapy into your own life if you don't feel as though you have the means to do Lacey's pathway or find a hypnotherapist in your area. I'll go into that a little bit more, but first I'm going to talk about the hypnotized brain and what's actually going on, and how this might be a little bit different from meditation or some other techniques that you might be using. So these are the three structures that are the most activated in a hypnotized brain. So you have first the salience network, which is communication, self-awareness, and your social behaviors. You have the ECN, monitoring behavior, delayed gratification, impulse control. This is a lot of your like executive functioning, working memory, as well as cognitive flexibilities. And then you have the default mode network. This is also activated in meditation, which you've probably experienced before if you do implement that technique into your life. So it has to do with thinking about others, the self, remembering the past, planning for the future, and daydreaming, and visualization, things like that. So the reason why this is so impactful is because these are like the three structures that are most activated when you are conscious and you are acting in your day-to-day. So maybe you're not like actively thinking about something or really trying to process something, but it's kind of like this, like if you were sitting outside and maybe people watching or something like that, or maybe, you know, presented with like a task that doesn't require like so much executive functioning. It's kind of like just like the you that's interacting on a very, I don't know, I want to say like casual level. And so the reason why this activation is similar to the hypnotic brain is that you're kind of in this theta state. And what happens is that if you see someone else doing something, all of the brain regions will be activated for that as well. So if you see somebody else eating an apple, the brain regions will also be activated in yourself for eating an apple, and they kind of include a lot of these structures. So this is why when you are doing hypnosis and you start to reprogram your brain, it looks really similar to your awake state and the state that you're typically activating on your, in your normal day to day. So you can start to visualize new things and implement new things that have to do with your self-awareness, your social behavior, your communication skills, delayed gratification, your impulse control, planning for the future. So it actually is really actionable. So once you imprint them subconsciously, they're going to really be easily activated in your awake state. But the reason why meditation is a little bit different and can't necessarily do this for you is because there's different pathways that are activated. So you do have the default mode network that's activated, but you have these other things going on as well. So the anterior cingulate cortex, that has to do with like your autonomic nervous system, heart rate and blood pressure. Then the cerebral cortex, attention, perception, awareness, thought, consciousness. If you've meditated before, you're totally aware of this. It's all about becoming the observer, and you can recognize maybe the subconscious beliefs that you have, but you can't physically like go in there and like do the work because it's not going to resemble your awake state brain. And then last but not least, your amygdala, your emotional processing. So this will help you in your day-to-day life and help you to start maybe recognizing those subconscious beliefs. But unless you're doing something like theta meditation will get you into a hypnotic state. And that's where you can start to activate it. So it'll start off with these primary brain structures being activated. And then once you reach theta meditation, you'll start to move into more of the salience network and that executive control, as well as the default mode network. So here are some manifesting tips. I stole that, if you're in breakaway movement, from Brooklyn, just because it was so genius. One is touch. So that's what I said before about how it can be really extreme if you have a neurological pathway that is really limiting, that's connected to a lot of other sensory modalities. You have this smell, it's like a smoker. So the smoker doesn't just like the chemical nicotine, they like the hand-to-mouth action of it. Maybe it's a sensory thing. They like the feeling of it on their lips because your lips have a lot of sensory neurons. They like the smell. They like the social aspect of it. Like, it's a lot of different things that are playing into the addiction of smoking. So if you are trying to create a neurological pathway that is better serving you, you can pair it with things. So this is like touching parts of your body that you wouldn't normally touch while you're trying to activate this process. So say I have a lot of limiting beliefs surrounding money, and I'm at the grocery store and I just bought so much stuff and it's pretty expensive, and I'm like, oh man, like this month is pretty tight, like, and I'm starting to like have those old subconscious limiting beliefs come up about like, I won't be able to make the money back. I should be buying cheaper food, things that like aren't really serving you and keeping you in a lack scarcity mindset. You can start to activate that new pathway that is more serving of saying like, I deserve this. This is nourishment for my body. I'll make this money back tenfold by next week. Keeping my body healthy and my mind healthy is what's going to help me achieve earning more in, the next week, month, year, etc. But while you're activating this process, touch a body part that you don't normally touch. I know this sounds like so weird, but like literally like in the grocery line, like do something weird, like touch your elbow or like, because it'll start to create more neurological pathways associated with different sensory modalities. And I'll start to integrate all of these other things that will help you reinforce those new behaviors. And then this next word, expanders, is a Lacey Phillips term, and it has to do with seeing is believing. So looking for mentors that have that life that you desire. So this goes back to what I was saying about the hypnotic brain and the awake brain, and how you have these associations of seeing someone else do something being played out and it being activated within yourself. So, you know, it goes back to the quote, like, you're the sum of the five closest people close to you or whatever. And it's because you're seeing those people and you have neurological pathways for them and their behaviors that are constantly being reinforced. So if you have a bunch of friends that drink a lot of booze on the weekends, it's going to be really hard for you to stop interacting with them on that level, because you have like all those neurological pathways built up for them and that activity. And every time you see them doing it, it reinforces it in your brain, which makes you want to do it and act out that, you know, it's like a trigger. So seeing is believing. Start looking for people that have what you have. Start looking for those people that have the life that you desire, whether it's on social media, but definitely physically. Start making friends with people that you just like, yeah, you want their life. Even if they're up here, just reach out to them, ask to buy them a coffee. It'll come back to you tenfold, and it'll start to reinforce those subconscious beliefs and these new neurological pathways that are going to help propel you for sure. So this is like my pie chart. I used to do like, you know, meditation and Abraham Hicks stuff, and I had it in my headphones and I was like jamming out. I was like telling everyone, I was like, oh yeah, this Abraham Hicks, like it's the best. And I was definitely seeing like some manifestations, which I thought was amazing at first, and it got me really excited because I was like, oh man, like, you know, I found $1 or someone reached out to me to do this out of nowhere and this happened, and you know, I got gifted this small little thing, and that was all fine and good, and I loved it at first. But then I started to realize that like nothing huge was coming in, and it was because of these subconscious limiting beliefs. I just had a lot of shit to go through and a lot of blocks to remove and tweeze out and start to build some new stuff. So now I'm all about recognizing these subconscious limiting beliefs and journaling them, and starting to, you know, be really conscious of when I'm activating them, and trying to go back and you know, enhance these other pathways that I'm trying to call in and these other behaviors. And then I rely on visualization and meditation as well, but they've taken a back seat, to be honest, because I really had to believe in these things before I could call it in. And I can honestly say within the past like 3 weeks of really doing this work, I've done a complete 180 shift, and my life is already looking completely different. It's like kind of kicking myself, to be honest, that I wasted, of course it's a learning process, but you know, that I spent so much time stuck in this other mindset that just wasn't serving me. And I was so bummed because I really thought that I was doing a good job. I was like, but I'm so positive, like I'm so stoked. I don't understand. I'm doing all of the things. But yeah, so these are your action steps. Start to determine those limiting beliefs. Are you afraid of being on your own? Do you believe you have to struggle to make money? And just recognizing all of the ways that you might be undermining your potential and your worth. And then explore the realm of subconscious. Use breath work or hypnotherapy recordings to ask your subconscious these questions, and then start to implement new pathways that are better serving you. So honestly, if you don't see yourself joining Lacey Phillips' pathway, then what I would do is look up how to induce hypnosis. And essentially what you do is you take yourself through all of these layers. So like, say, imagine yourself in your favorite place, and like, how does it smell? You know, start to really like visualize exactly what's going on. And then you start to like move yourself down into the depths of your subconscious. So then maybe it's like you rode down a river, and then at the end of the river you get off and you dock, and then you go into a cabin, and then in the cabin there is a fireplace, and you crawl into the fireplace, and there's like a gate, and then you go down the gate, and then there's a pathway or something. So you kind of take yourself visually. It's almost like a guided meditation, like down through these layers until you really feel like you're in this trance state. And breathwork can really help with this. I don't know if you've ever heard of the Wim Hof, but this has been extremely helpful for me. And just getting down into that state, and then starting to ask yourself some of these questions. So what I have been doing as well is making recordings on my phone. You can pair it with like a really relaxing sound or something like that, and then record your own voice asking yourself these questions, and starting to maybe help yourself implement like new pathways. So asking where these subconscious limiting beliefs came from, and then giving yourself time to move through that, waiting, and then saying, okay, let's rewire that belief. How can you construct a new belief that will better serve you? And when it's in your own voice, it's pretty wild, because you're in this like hypnotic state already, and then you hear your own voice start to trigger some of these things. And it's super powerful. And that is all, my friends. I know I went a couple minutes under what I was expecting to. I talked super, super fast. So if you guys have any questions or want to talk about anything, I would love to do that.
The last thing that you mentioned, where you do the recordings on your phone. So is that like you record like a nice sound or something, and as you're doing the sound, you add on the questions for yourself?
Yeah. So maybe like finding like a yoga beat or something like that, like one of those really long ones that last like a half an hour or something, and then have that play on your laptop, and then make a voice recording on your phone. And then you can like put that on your headphones and just like, try to like get into that state and start to access some of those beliefs.
Okay, and can you give like some example questions of what like you would put it on the recording or something?
Yeah.
Because like this is totally new to me. Like I haven't even like thought or come about somebody that has done that before. And like just hypnosis itself, it's like so new to me as well.
Yeah.
So it's very interesting, or I really wouldn't know how to go about it.
Yeah, completely. So there are certain things that might work better for you. If you look up, just like look up hypnotherapy or something like that, and I'll give you some keywords as well, but you might want to fine tune it for yourself, because, everything I say might not resonate with you. But first, it's really just like taking yourself to that subconscious place. So like I said, like taking yourself to your favorite place, whether that's in nature, or maybe it's, a memory or something, somewhere where you feel like really comfortable. And then just experiencing that comfort. How does it feel? Are there, are your feet in the sand? What does it smell like? Things like that. And then once you've established that, starting to take yourself down into some sort of depth. So you want to think in like layers, like you're trying to go down. So whether that's like you swam down to the bottom of the ocean, and at the bottom of the ocean, there's a door, and then you go through the door, and then you keep going down. Or maybe it's a well, or something along those lines. Like maybe it's a secret passageway in your house, and like all of a sudden there's a secret room. And think about definitely going down, and then do it in layers. So on like the first layer, maybe ask yourself a certain subconscious question, like if it's surrounding money, being like, when is the first time that you realized that money was a thing? Because of course at a young age, maybe you didn't recognize that money was even existed, and all of a sudden at least for me, money had a lot of shame surrounding it. My parents were always talking about like, oh, you know, my mom was like, oh, your dad, he never, because my parents were divorced. So he was like, oh, your dad doesn't pay child support. Your dad, you know, we have to go without. But like, I lived in East Hampton and like never, you know what I mean? Like I went to East Hampton High School, like had nice clothes, was never hungry. Like it really wasn't that bad. But I had this like constant trigger of like, oh yeah, money, oh, it's such a huge problem, you know? So just bringing up like that first time that you might have recognized that like money had some association with it. Was it like, yeah, like I said, like shame? Were you struggling for it? Or maybe you grew up in a wealthy family, but it still was like you had to hide maybe the money that you had, like of being like humble, like don't show everybody that we have money, like that type of like hush hush type of thing, like that creates shame as well. And then once you've established that on like the first layer, starting to go down further. So then, you know, you walk down another tunnel or go down a different ladder, something of the sort of like accessing another deeper layer. And then introducing this idea of like reconstructing that situation. And then it's like, okay, well, now imagine that in that situation that you first learned about money, that it was actually, that money was a super beautiful thing. And you learned that money gives you the ability to donate, and money gives you the ability to feed a family in need or something like that, and starting to implement something that is more aligned with what you were trying to call in.
Thank you. That really helped.
Yeah, it's honestly super new to me too. And I think the only reason why I had like any knowledge of it was just because I was already studying like psychology and neuroscience, but it was in a very like clinical sense. So, you know, it's just like all these like red tape and, you know, all of that type of stuff. But then being able to like merge it with manifestation has been like huge for me. So that's why I'm doing these web classes. I'm just like, yo, guys, we need to know this. This is life changing for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, though. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, you're welcome. Well, all right, guys. That's all I had to say. I'm going to stop recording now.